Good morning, and let me welcome you all to a hearing on the Budget Committee's Task Force on Government Performance. I'm going to try to zip through my opening comments because, as I've told Jean, unfortunately we have scheduled 2 votes at 10:30, so we may have to adjourn for a few minutes and then come back for our second panel. This is the first hearing of the 112th Congress for the Bipartisan Task Force on Government Performance. I'd like to start by thanking Chairman Conrad for lending me the gavel for this session and for his support of the task force. I'd also like to thank Ranking Member Sessions and for Senators Whitehouse, Cardin, Crapo, and Thune for their service as members of the task force. And I know that we have been joined this morning as well by Senator Stabenow, and do appreciate her interest in some of our work. The legislation, we're going to be focusing on 2 things today. The recent GAO study that Jane's going to be talking about in a few moments, and also the Government Performance and Results Modernization Act, a new law that was significantly updates the statutory framework for government planning and performance reporting. I'd like to call this, I hope history will show that it is the biggest little law that nobody's heard of in terms of its effect on a going-forward basis, and I really want to again thank Senator Stabenow for being here. It does go forward, this law, and we're going to do the quick overview, really puts forward a new approach to the critical challenges we face in the country in terms of how we make sure that we get the most bang for the buck from our government. And since we are holding this hearing in the Budget Committee hearing rooms and in the proud tradition of Senator Conrad and Senator Stabenow, let no meeting get started without a few charts and graphs. I thought it would be appropriate, just for those of you who are not here on a regular basis, to see why the challenge of getting the most effectiveness from our tax dollars is so eminently important at this moment. So in the great tradition of Senator Conrad, the chart that we have always seen, regardless of subject matter, if we can't get our act together, we are looking at deficits as far as the eye can see. And those of us who've been involved in grappling with this issue realizes that $1 trillion a year plus deficits are not sustainable. $14 trillion in debt is not sustainable. The fact that every day that we fail to act on this issue, that we add literally $4 billion a day, Senator Stabenow, to our debt, $4 billion a day, that at some point we're going to have to pay back, means that we have to leave no stone unturned. So in light of the growing fiscal challenges, and that was our current status, revenues at kind of an all-time low, outlays at a total all-time high. Back in my old job as governor, we would call this a structural budget deficit. The lines will never meet under our current approach, and again is a requirement of why we must act. And this is the challenge of this task force, and let me be clear that trying to figure out how we save resources, how we avoid duplication is a part. It is not going to make those lines meet in and of itself. It is not a single silver bullet. This is going to take enormous action on a series of fronts, but it is part of the challenge ahead of us. So in light of the growing fiscal challenge, the task force's work is to identify strategies to save taxpayer dollars while also preserving important policy priorities. This is very important. That our area is not so much looking at solely elimination, it is looking at how we can maintain the key delivery of services, but perhaps through consolidation, combination of services, something again that Senator Stabenow is looking at within her Agriculture Committee. Government duplication and reorganization is a hot topic these days. The President has talked about it. GAO has talked about it. And we are definitely working in Congress to try and see if we can find some new solutions. Now, Johnson, come on, this is not such a hot subject matter that you have to, as a new member, sit down at the kids' table. Come on up here. Let me give you, I recall from my first 2 years, sitting literally in some of the rooms where they had to add an extra table. Unfortunately, from the Democratic side, we've already done some consolidation, and that kids' table has disappeared. We get to be at the big dais, but as a former business guy like myself, we welcome Senator Johnson. This should be a topic that I know he will have great interest as well. The President recently appointed my good friend Jeff Zients as the first government chief performance officer ever in administration, and he has been recently tasked with the effort that the President outlined in his State of the Union to start reorganization of the federal government. That is something that is enormously challenging, and that will bring us to our first witness in a few moments, but now we're going to go ahead and go through these very quickly. And that is something that Gene Dodaro is going to report in some detail, a recent very important report of the GAO that talked about the amount of duplication that we see in the federal government. This is something that we've all been familiar with. I know Senator Stabenow has been familiar with. I, as a governor, always looked at workforce training, but again, a few examples. 82 programs across 10 federal agencies that focus on teacher quality, 56 programs across 20 agencies around financial literacy, 80 programs across 8 agencies that support transportation for disadvantaged persons. These are all important policy goals. We ought to be able to do it with less initiatives in a more consolidated effort. So that is what we're hopefully going to hear about today. We also want to talk, particularly as we get to the second panel, about the GIPRA bill. And this is actions that we took, Senators Carper and Akaka, on Government Performance and Results Modernization Act. Again, I hope it will be the biggest little bill that no one's ever heard of in terms of real effect as we deal with deficit reduction. And again, this legislation looked at a number of goals that have to be higher on our agenda. One of the things I think I've already seen in my short tenure here, and I know Senator Stabenow has talked about, and as a former business guy, Senator Johnson is concerned about as well, when we give agencies literally dozens and dozens of goals, they don't know what's important. So until we can focus agencies down to a manageable number, 3 to 5 goals, where we can then focus our resources in a better way, we're never going to get there. We as well need, as we look at this kind of duplication and overlap, we need to make sure that we get out of our silos and within a policy area, even if it comes from different agencies, identify clear agency cross-cutting government-wide goals. Right now, our reporting is on an annual basis. I can't think of a business that either one of us would run that would only allow annual reporting if we had our shareholders and stockholders, which are the taxpayers of America, not wanting to hear on a more regular basis so that we, as in effect the board, can act more quickly. Within that, we've got to make sure that we identify programs that actually support the goals, and then we have to align this process with the congressional budget timetable. Let's go ahead and go to the next set of goals. And this is something that actually, this is the new stuff. This is the stuff that actually I think will have enormous effect. As we go into the deficits as far as the eye can see, as we have to make dramatic cutbacks on spending, one of the areas, and this is something that was, quite frankly, even some of the administration resisted, which was to say, let's actually ask agencies to identify those programs that aren't working as effectively. Rather than simply having this initiative reside at OMB, why not ask the folks who are actually running programs to identify their top performing programs and their least performing programs? This will become a very important tool, again, as we work with GAO and we work other efforts to see how we can improve performance. As well, then, everything has got to be about accountability. We've got to hold our senior level government officials accountable, and we actually, through this legislation, create, in effect, a chief operating officer and chief performance officer within each agency, so that there's not this kind of That's not my responsibility. Management and accountability has not been always key priorities. We now have a person that will be identified. This will not be requiring new hires. It will be simply taking a member of the senior management team and making sure that this type of reporting, this type of identification, this type of operating oversight will fall within somebody's specific purview, so again, we can hold them accountable. This will allow us as Congress to, I believe, hold our agencies more accountable, and so that we're not simply adding new requirements. I mean, one of the things I recall as a governor is, you ask more from your workforce, particularly during tough times, but if you're going to, you can't simply be additive all the time. We've got to actually remove some responsibilities so that we can really focus on what's important, and we've at least started by what I think should be the lowest hanging fruit. We're asking each agency to find areas where we can eliminate, my hope is up to 10% of initial reporting requirements. And then going to the next slide very quickly, this is where we found somebody saying actually something good about this bill, and you can read it on your own. And now let's go ahead, and I want to thank staff who prepared a much more in-depth opening statement that thanked many more people than I've thanked so far this morning. Considering yourselves all thanked, and I thank the staff. Now let's get to the panel, because since I've indicated at the outset, we've got 2 votes at 10:30, and I think you're going to find both the first panel and the second panel very interesting. It's my pleasure to introduce our first witness on our first panel, Gene Dodaro, the Comptroller General at the Government Accounting Office. We're fortunate to have Mr. Dodaro with us today to share his recommendations on implementation of the new performance framework, but to also share his views about how to address the overlap and duplication from his recent report. I think many of us have seen and heard about the GAO's recent report that outlined with much greater specificity, I think it was over 280 different programs where we have duplication and overlap within the Federal Government. As Comptroller General, Mr. Dodaro oversees the development of hundreds of reports each year that have led to billions of dollars in taxpayer savings and improvements to a wide range of government programs and services. He's a long career at the GAO of over 30 years, holding key executive posts such as Chief Operating Officer and heading the largest division in accounting and information management. As we all know, the valuable contributions that GAO makes here every day in Congress, and in fact, a GAO fellow, Ben Light, supported the development of the performance legislation that we discussed today and putting to work many of the recommendations that the GAO has made over the years. And I want to thank Ben again for his good work on the Performance Task Force last year, and we'd be happy to have him redetailed to us again if it would be to your choosing. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Dodaro. The floor is now yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.